Welcome to the IS-BAO SafetyNet webinar series presented today by Polaris Aero, talking about resilience and role definition for safety officers. I'm Catherine Helst, the IS-BAO Operations Manager, and I just have a couple of quick housekeeping items. Due to the number of attendees, audience members on mute, and you'll be on mute for the presentation. We do have a place for you to ask questions and submit comments, and we welcome those at any time during the session. You'll see a little box, a little icon with a question mark in it. It says questions. If you click on that, you can type it in at any time during the presentation. So today's webinar by Polaris Aero is focusing on strengthening the safety officer role as a strategic enabler of organizational performance beyond regulatory compliance. We'll cover best practices for clear role definition, system continuity, knowledge management, and change readiness. Through practical examples, we'll demonstrate how to build resilient systems that remain effective despite turnover, growth, or restructuring. Great topic. Today, our presenters are Kellie Roby of Polaris Aero. Kellie is Vice President of Polaris Aero Safety Services Division, which specializes in assisting Polaris clients more effectively implement and achieve their safety goals. Prior to joining Polaris, she spent more than a decade honing her skills in Part 135 and Part 91 operations environment in roles ranging from FBO operations, flight operations, serving as a flight crew member on a Beechjet 400 and Hawker 800, safety manager, and most recently a business manager overseeing both scheduling and charter sales for a Part 135 charter and management company. With her is Jack Williamson, safety consultant at Polaris Aero. Jack has his bachelor's degree in maintenance management from Middle Tennessee State and a master's in aviation safety from Embry-Riddle. He was commissioned in the Navy in 2012, where he flew the P-3 Orion and P-8 Poseidon. He was a P-8 instructor pilot, aviation safety officer, CRM instructor, and is a trained mishap investigator. He worked with Amazon Air as a senior program manager for the standards department. Welcome, Kellie and Jack, and I will turn it over to you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here as always. Thank you. And to the entire IBAC team, thank you for having us and continuing along with the SafetyNet webinar series. Some really great topics this spring, and we're excited to be a part of it. Actually, Jack, I noticed in your background, you mentioned Middle Tennessee State, and I left that out of my background. So I need to true mine up a little bit. You've got two Blue Raiders from the Middle Tennessee State group on the call, so buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. So today we're going to talk a little bit about resilience of a safety officer role, and then how we do that in the organization, and then also the role definition for safety officers. Now, the titles that we're going to use throughout the presentation may be safety officer, maybe safety manager, maybe SMS manager. We're going to use those interchangeably because we know we're speaking to a group of safety professionals, and your title may be different than what you see on the screen. The takeaways here are about defining the role and responsibilities. The title we'll get to in another topic, but just wanted to make that call out in case you see it in the slides today. Now, where we'll start today is talking about your organizational safety journey. Now, everyone starts at their own place in the safety journey, looking up Safety Mountain, if you will. And that may be from an organizational standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. If you're coming in new to an organization and you're taking on the safety manager role for the first time, and someone before you has had that, and they've started their way up this mountain, and you're taking the baton and keeping us going. But for the basis of this slide, we'll talk about the organization and what this looks like for the full safety journey, regardless of who's passing the baton. It really starts with compliance and what do the regulations say. That's kind of the basis of where we start, and how we get our North Star, if you will, is what do the regulations say, and then how do we comply with those regulations. Beyond that, and you'll see those are very far down on the base of the mountain here, so that's just the start. Beyond that, and how we get above that level, is figuring out for us personally and as an organization, what does the word ALARP mean to us, which is a risk that is lowered to a level that's as low as reasonably practicable. And what does that mean to us versus what does that mean to the company? And hopefully those two things align. But what does that mean to us? It's usually above what the regulations say and how we're complying with that. So what additional policies should we put in place to make sure we're achieving that next level and making sure we're reducing risk down to a level that's as low as reasonably practicable? So we've done that. We've put in our additional policies in place. Now, how do we measure our performance? How do we know how we're doing? Are we measuring that anecdotally, or do we have some objective safety data that we're using to define that? And then once we put some objective safety data in place that we can define, and then how does that compare to other similar operations in the industry? Are we following best practices? How are we getting there? So this is just a tidbit, again, a snapshot of what a safety journey looks like, of going beyond compliance and into managing those levels of risk on a day-to-day basis. It's a very fluid and dynamic thing from day to day. And then you notice when you get to the top, there's usually an additional peak beyond that you just can't see yet, and we just keep trudging along up safety mountain. So we're all going to start in our same place here. The main takeaway here is that you want to have your sights set on that finish line. You want to have your sights set of where are we trying to go as an organization, and how are we contributing to that in our role as a safety officer or safety manager. So before you raise your hand and volunteer to be the safety manager, unless you already have, and then let's have this conversation if you haven't, how we need to have that conversation with our organization about being very clear about what is our goal. How are we trying to get there? Right? And that will help you define what your roles and responsibilities need to be to achieve that goal. Now, it is a journey. We've talked about going up the mountain a little bit. And while we would love to go up and directly to the right, sometimes that's not always the case. It's not a linear journey. So you'll see the line there for high performing department. That's where we'd love to stay. And anytime we're reducing risk and doing our jobs and things are clicking along nicely, we're reducing risk. And anytime we're falling below the line, we're increasing risk, right? So as we get going up of our safety journey, following compliance and learning all the lessons that we do through an organization, eventually we'll cross that line and we'll become a high performing department as we continue to learn and have new ideas. But then maybe you have a key retirement and you lose that knowledge of the person who was in your department. And then they, the company historian, if you will, you lose all that. And for a moment, before you backfill that and you go back through and you learn all your new ideas and lessons learned, it may take a second to get back above that high performing department line. And once you do, again, we're climbing up safety mountain, but then maybe you have your safety manager that gets a different job or moves, what have you. And again, we find ourselves kind of falling below that high performing department line, where we have to trudge and get new ideas and lessons learned. So it kind of feels like we're doing one step forward, two steps back, and it can be a little discouraging to have that feeling. So instead, what should we be striving for? We should be striving for making sure anytime we learn new ideas and lessons learned that we have processes and procedures and things in place to make sure that when we have that key retirement, yes, we'll probably lose a little bit of external data, but how do we limit that to where we're not dipping down below that high performing department line? How are we focusing on going up and to the left, if you will, through continual learning, strong culture, and organizational resilience? So that's what we're going to focus on today, is trying to figure out how do we go up and to the right through roles and responsibilities in your own role. And we do that using a tool. If you've been in our presentations before through SafetyNet, you've seen us talk about people, process, and technology. And it's really something that we believe very centrally to our organization and how you should go about building resilience in your organization. So the basis of this for people, process, and technology is that your people have to be well trained. They have to be appropriately resourced, both financially and also with bandwidth to do their job, right? They have to be engaged in the system and empowered to make decisions, and then encouraged by leadership to participate in making change. The process part is you need to have processes that are complete. They're actually written down. They're well defined, so everyone knows exactly what they're doing. They're not overly bureaucratic, and you don't have a manual that's 1,200 pages long that no one's going to read, and it has too many bits of red tape in it. We can't even follow it, even if we wanted to. So trim that down so it's actually usable, and then flexible so that the professionals that you hire in the situations where you maybe don't have all the information or you're working in real time can use their professional judgment to make the best call. and then ultimately results oriented. So we're shooting for up and to the right there, right? So we're trying to achieve that. And how do we do that? Through results oriented processes. And then the last portion of this is the technology portion. So we want our technology to be simple, meaningful, and seamless. What does that mean? Simple, because if you don't have technology that's simple, your people are not going to use it. We go 1,000 miles an hour in business aviation, and with that, one other thing to do, like hard coding information from system to system, or making things that are really difficult to do within your technology, it's just another step to the day, right? So keep it simple, easy to work with, use integrations to leverage that technology from system to system and make your life a little easier. The meaningful part is the why we do all of this. The meaningful portion of technology is taking this people and process functionality and streamlining that to lean on that when we need to. And the seamless part is how we do it, right? Again, integrating with partners that you can. If you're putting flight times over here in one system, it should automatically come over into your other system over here, so you're not hard coding things, and just leveraging that anytime that you can to make this a little simpler. Now, the graphic on the right, you'll see is a pie chart. Sometimes we refer to that as a three-legged stool as well, but the overarching point here is that anytime you have a situation where this pie chart is not equal, or the legs of the stool, or one's maybe shorter than the other, okay, just for a graphical reference here. Maybe you have two pilot positions open, and you know that you're short staffed, so your people are running a little harder than they usually are. Or maybe you're going through manual revisions on your process side, so you're completely redoing your manual system. You need to lean on your technology and your people to make up the rest of that pie chart. Maybe you're swapping technology, whether that's your SMS system, your scheduling system, your maintenance tracking system. You really have to lean on your people knowing what they're doing, and the process is spelling that out and clearly defining all of those things that need to be happening, so things aren't falling through the cracks whenever those changes happen. All of that to say, we'll show you how to strengthen those areas and help you leverage that to better define the role that you're using and simplify that along the way for resilience of the company. Okay, so we talked a little bit about people, process, technology. Let's talk about the process part. As it relates to the safety manager role, and taking a look at your processes that support your position, one thing that you want to do as a safety officer or safety manager is to do a thorough review of your safety processes and procedures to make sure the things that you are putting out into your organization are trued up. They're well defined. Again, they're lean and mean, they're flexible, they're results oriented, and you're setting someone else up to be in your role eventually. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit for succession planning, but review your processes just to make sure they're trued up. For the next one, we have a safety officer role documentation. We're about to give you some examples of that, but a current and complete job description that's been updated for scope within the last year or so is very, very helpful. A lot of times job descriptions are one of the last things that get done, or maybe it changes over time and we haven't looked at it in a while. Safety officer roles are very commonly a place for things to collect that are vaguely safety related. So anytime you feel like there needs to be an audit of that job description and things have been added and maybe we haven't looked at it in a while, that's one of those things that needs to be on the front burner. And then what does this position touch? Like a list of systems, logins, vendor interfaces, process touch points, all of that should be documented in your process section. Again, not only for continuity, let's say if you ever take on a different role and someone has to backfill behind you, but also just for understanding, again, well-defined processes and having that listed somewhere so that we understand what the role accomplishes and that it's pointed in the right direction. So one sign of strong culture that we like to mention is just the general belief that we should all leave our current roles better than when we found them. So I'm currently a VP of Safety Services here at Polaris Aero. I, may call in Rich tomorrow. And if that happens, then what happens to my role and how is the person behind me taking on that role? And hopefully I left this role better than when I found it, right? And that's the same for anyone in this organization, anyone in your organization. It really starts with strong role and process documentation and then building on that as you go. So let's give you a couple of examples of what role definition looks like. And we'll give you a military example, which is fantastic and gives some great framework. And then we'll pivot and we'll do a civilian example so you can take some notes from that if you need a template to work from. So Jack, I'm going to turn this over to you if you want to give us the Naval School of Aviation Safety's take on the roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities here.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I like what the Navy puts out for a couple reasons. One, because I think of naval aviation safety and military aviation safety in a lot of ways is kind of like the North Star of aviation safety because, for a while I thought, well, we don't have to worry about the business side of things. We've got a lot of bandwidth. We can take somebody off the flight schedule, send them to safety school for a while, plug them back into the operation, all those kinds of things. But as you dig into it, it's all about operational success and efficiency. So it also kind of makes business sense as well, how they think about things too. So, naval aviation safety has gotten really good at taking a very dangerous operation like landing airplanes on boats and making it repeatable and safe. So they do that through a culture of standardization and system safety and stuff like that. So, for all its frustrations, the military is very good at defining things and writing instructions and policies, which, especially now on the outside, you see some usefulness there. So just kind of walk you through a couple definitions, and these are in order, basically, of priority of what you would want your safety officer to do. So act as a principal advisor to the commanding officer or accountable executive in these terms on all matters of aviation safety. And along with that, advise and assist the commanding officer in establishing and maintaining the command aviation SMS. So the primary thing there is to be the principal advisor. And then as you're giving suggestions on what to do, help with the implementation of that as well. Acting as kind of the boots on the ground there, the conduit between leadership and the frontline operation. Maintain appropriate records of the SMS. Basically, just the day-to-day admin of the SMS is the third bullet point there too. So it's a required role, but like if you're ranking those things, that advisory portion is a little bit higher priority, and then, like Kelly said, it's a little bit of a catch-all role too sometimes. So that last piece is coordinate safety matters within your squadron. That could be kind of anything. So now we're talking about, like she said, the insurance piece, coordinating safety meetings and some of those other types of like event coordinator type things, anything that's related to safety. But that goes into the safety promotion piece too. The safety culture and being the mouthpiece of safety is certainly important. And we'll get into a little bit later in the presentation some of the intangible skills that you want to look for when you're looking for a safety officer or trying to, maybe tag somebody in the organization, what type of person and personality you would want to do that. So those four kind of roles as a safety officer would support then the highlighted goal of naval aviation safety management system. Why do we even have a safety management system within naval aviation? Well, it's to enhance operational readiness through safety by preserving life and protecting aircraft and equipment. So keeping I always say keep the main thing when you're thinking about all this stuff. The main thing in aviation safety is to not crash airplanes, right? So it's great if we get insurance breaks. It's great if we get IS-BAO certification, all that kind of stuff. Like that stuff is all good. But at the end of the day, we're trying to not crunch airplanes, not crash airplanes. So those roles that you're defining for your safety officer, the things you need them to do are to ultimately fly airplanes, maintain airplanes safer, and then therefore more efficiently too, right? You can't fly a broken airplane. So then they go down and define a little bit further. In your role, what are you going to need to do? What does it mean to be a principal advisor to the commanding officer or the accountable executive? So again, your commanding officer needs your advice and counsel on aviation safety issues. You need to be the CO's eyes and ears on the ground and need to be able to report freely what you observe to the commanding officer. So the recommendation is not only to say, hey, safety officer, you should report things to me, but you must report things to me. Not only should you report things to me or must report things to the accountable executive, but also if the accountable executive is doing something wrong too, right? So, it's very important as the leader to make that blatantly obvious, to say, hey, look, especially if the leader organization is still flying or still maintaining or whatever operational piece too, if they're not just managing, they need to the safety officer needs to be comfortable kind of calling out when you're messed up too, because at the end of the day, again, it's not about our ego as a leader or anything like that. It's about preventing aircraft mishaps. So then it goes on to say, your safety education coupled with your experience and knowledge in the aircraft and familiarity with the squadron's operations give you a base of knowledge that allows you to critically think about the squadron and its operations and safety. So Kellie will show a little bit later kind of an org chart and how you've got a dotted line from as a safety officer to leadership, but yet you're still there in the operation. So it's kind of a unique position where you're there day to day. You're operating. Maybe you're operating slightly less because you've now got this safety role going on, but you should have some operational experience. Like when I was tagged to go to safety school, it was a prerequisite to at least be an aircraft commander and probably on your way to being an instructor pilot as well. So you need to be knowledgeable in what you're doing. And if you're not a subject matter expert in that airplane, at least able to ask the right questions, right? So, and it goes back to that personality piece that we'll talk more about in a little bit. But it's very important, and that's why it's called out specifically to take the combination of safety experience, however you're able to give that to folks, whether it's through formalized courses, through MBAA or USC or Embry-Riddle, whatever it might be, or just online courses and just continuing education stuff like this. Take the safety knowledge and kind of safety care that they have, and couple that with your technical acumen and recommendations to leadership. Hey, here's what I'm seeing operationally, the way things need to change, but then also culturally too. So the safety officer should be someone who is able to act as a mouthpiece for the line operators and be able to say, hey, there's a lot of grumbling going on about XYZ, and that may seem insignificant to safety, but an example I always like to give is I got a lot of safety reports about a broken printer in the hangar. And I kept going, guys, okay, get it. Why are you talking to me about a broken printer? And then realize people are having to delay their flights because they're trying to print off flight plans and all these required paperwork that we have to have before you go flying. And now we're getting pushed into these afternoon thunderstorms in Florida and stuff like that. So taking what could be water cooler kind of grumblings, thinking about it from a safety lens. And that's the other thing too. Some of the safety training is just trying to train someone in the organization's mind to kind of always have those spidey senses up and be looking out for things that could be done better. And then is comfortable taking those to leadership too and saying, hey, these are some things, hopefully with actionable suggestions too, whether it be a policy change or new equipment, whatever that risk mitigation is, to take that to leadership too. Again, we'll talk more a little bit about this in a minute, but the personality type, it can be very awkward and difficult to kind of speak truth to power, but that's essentially what you're calling on this person to do, or this position at least. Maybe could be shared by a couple of folks, but so that's, again, from leadership perspective, it's important to just blatantly say that, hey, I not only am empowering you, but I expect you to speak truth to me, even if it's my mistakes that you're calling out. And that takes some practice too, acknowledging that with them too. If you're not used to telling your boss when they're messed up, That takes some practice. So, and some humility from the side of leadership too, to acknowledge like this is professional. This is not personal. Obviously, should not be reflected in your performance evaluation. Something, well, you hurt my feelings when you told me I didn't land the airplane well. So just acknowledging that that's going to take some time, and find a way to get some folks practice with that. And even if it's just, hey, let's go to lunch and become comfortable with each other and that type of thing. So I'll kind of finish up with the Navy's role definition here with, it's not on the screen, but they finished this section by giving you some questions to ask yourself as you're going throughout your time as a safety officer, and acknowledging that safety is one of those things that, what do they call it? An active latent data or something like that. Basically, you're kind of tracking non-events a lot of times. So we talk about, you want to look for things that you can track proactively, like reporting increases and all those kinds of things. But ultimately, you're hoping that nothing occurs, right? You're hoping that no accidents occur. And we can talk later about, other proactive ways to track that. But my point with this is, there's some questions that they give us to be asking ourselves as we're looking around the operation. We can say, just continually, are we leveraging the SMS in our squadron or organization appropriately to minimize risk and enhance mission achievement? So again, to enhance mission achievement, are our operations are they more efficient? Are we meeting our goals? And is our safety department enabling that? It sounds kind of simple, like, well, yeah, that question is basically like, are we doing our job? But it's a good reminder of like, well, what is our job? Why are we here as a safety department? Am I proactively thinking about that? So it's just like, you're flying instruments, it's that scan, like, well, I haven't looked at this in a minute. Oh yeah, okay, I'm still on altitude, whatever it may be. Second is, are we achieving our 4 outcomes? So go back to, your role as a safety. Okay, have I been giving advice to the executive or to the accountable executive? Have I been giving them meaningful advice? Like, have I just been telling them what's wrong, or have I given them solutions and ways to mitigate these things? Am I managing the SMS right? Like, do I have documentation? Am I seeing increases in reporting? Am I doing the 4 principles of SMS and things like that? And then am I coordinating safety manager or safety matters within the squadron, or, do I need to delegate that out too? So are we meeting our objectives there? And then the last 2 questions are I think the best way to frame, to take a step back and reframe your point of view. And are we safe to operate, and are we operating safely? So that helps you go, okay, are we safe to operate? Is our environment that we've set, is it even safe to start the operation? And then once that question's been answered in the affirmative, are we then conducting the operation safely as well? So as you kind of keep those things in your scan as a safety officer, that'll help you with those proactive risk assessments, identifying hazards and those types of things that you can then work through the SMS path. So, and I think all that then is wrapped up in a positive, it's positive, but also it's the safety culture is kind of the nucleus of all of naval aviation, at least from my experience. And it's assumed in everything you do. So keep asking those questions, and then be very vocal with that. And that's another way. You can also ask those to people. It's, again, another way of safety promotion. Just, hey, Joe Schmo, line pilot or maintainer, do you think we're safe to operate? Are we operating safely? And then you kind of start those conversations and ask, it's a interactive risk assessment or hazard analysis there as well. So, yeah, that's kind of how we handle things in the naval aviation side of the house.
I really like that. is it safe to operate, and are we operating safely? It's like, I know if you've sat in on our presentations before, we tend to do a lot of sports analogies, but Steve Bruno even gives a lot of great presentations on, I think he's referencing, like, is your field, is your team ready? Is your field ready? Have you set everything up for success? And then when you go perform, are you actually performing to a level that would make you successful as well? So there's two components of that. And I love that different take on, is it safe to operate? Have we created the environment for safe operations to happen? And then once we go pivot to do that, are we doing that? Are we performing to the level where we are operating safely? So thanks for that. And again, just to wrap up this role definition, what I love about what the Navy does for their roles is that they have a very concise way of saying, here is the stuff that you are responsible for. There's no question about what you're responsible for in aviation safety. And they do a great job. I mean, it fits on one slide, right? So they do a great job of tying it back to the goal and saying, this is why this is important. Here's what you're responsible for. This is why this is important. And here's a way that you can make sure that you're, a couple questions you can make sure you're pointing to the North Star while you're operating in the wild, if you will. So I thought it was really cool to throw this up here as an example, because if you've been in this in safety for a while, you've probably seen a couple of different iterations of what a role and responsibility is, or a job description might look like. But you can true things up, make it more concise, more understandable, more actionable. I think this is a great new take on what that looks like. Now, sure, go ahead.
One last thing on that too. As I was rereading this, hadn't looked at this in a couple of years, but I think of a military instruction, and it's very sterile, and it's very legal almost. And one thing that I remember being struck by getting into the safety school and the safety world, basically in naval aviation, is it's almost conversational the way they write this. So you don't necessarily have to make it, if you're trying to make a new job description or something like that, and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I say this in this like concise, professional way? Like, don't let those types of things necessarily get in your way with this, because again, the whole purpose of aviation safety is that, kind of let your guard down, open kimono type relationship. So it can be really effective also just to go, hey, look, in the years to come, your efforts as the ASO will blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like a letter to your safety officer almost, and just kind of start that conversational relationship there.
And it's a great example of top-down leadership, of support and encouragement for participation in that, which I love too. So again, this is great for iterating on what you already have to take it to that next level and give it some oomph. If you are new to the role, or if you are hiring for this role and you want to take some screenshots either, or even have a conversation about, okay, pivot to the civilian space, what do I actually need to make sure we're covering here in our core responsibilities for a safety officer or safety manager role? Here's a good example of that, which is, again, start with the purpose. Why does this exist in the first place? And you can judge that to be whatever it means for your department to make it resonate well with your team, but then also list out those core responsibilities. And you can pick and pull from this list if that makes it easier, but I would also say try your best to make sure you make that as concise as possible, and actually the stuff that they are responsible for in the day-to-day. Jack touched on this earlier, but safety is one of those areas, or one of those roles within the organization that tends to be a position that accumulates roles and responsibilities. Congratulations, you're now responsible for this thing that's like vaguely safety related. So the more you can define what this role is actually responsible for, the more that we can make sure that we're always pointed towards our goals and making progress in those goals. And if we're trying to track everything and we're trying to make this person do everything, then their focus is going to be diluted as well. So one of the things that we like to talk about when we talk about role definition is, again, how does this role most effectively contribute to the success of the organization, or heading up that safety mountain? And the considerations you also might want to take in defining this role and deciding how many of these little bullet points to copy and paste and put on your safety manager's plate is, okay, in reality, is this a part-time role? Is this a full-time role? Is this a pilot who flies 364 days out of the year, and this is like their one day off that they're going to be tackling all of this? Is this someone who's working in the FBO to do training, and then you also handed them safety because they asked like 2 safety related questions in a meeting one time, and we needed somebody to do that anyway? So like, what does their bandwidth actually look like? And does that align with the goals that you have in mind for climbing up that safety mountain? And if it's not aligned, then what can we do to resource that? Is there a, do you need 2 people that are managing that, like a lead and then an assistant that can kind of keep things going whenever the operational pace picks up? Or do you need to outsource that? There's third-party companies out there, ourselves included, that help people with just extra hands of, hey, we've got this goal, we've got this initiative, and the bosses decided we're flying 300 more hours this year than we anticipated. Or we decided that we want to tackle XYZ goal this year, and it's kind of throwing me off the stuff that I had set up already here at the FBO. So if you guys could just come in and give us some extra hands with processing reports or getting our people bought in, like that would be great. So there are a lot of ways to resource that, but in a leadership position, for our leaders on the call, really take a step back and say, are people that we're asking to do this, do they have resources, not only financially, but their bandwidth as well to tackle the stuff that's on this list? And if not, we either need to shorten the list or disperse the list amongst other, multiple people, or we need to contract out some help to keep meeting those goals. So ultimate takeaway from that is start with the end goal in mind and make sure that everything is aligned with that. And we're making good decisions about resourcing that effectively. Now, we talked a little bit about the other parts of the pie, if you will, of our people, process, and technology. The people part, again, we need to be well trained. We need to be appropriately resourced. Let me see if there we go. Okay, sorry, I got some lag here. We need to be well trained. We need to be appropriately resourced. Again, time and money as well. We have to get these folks engaged, empowered, and encouraged. And for the folks that are maybe hiring into this position, if you have someone who's new to safety, we need to talk about general industry safety training as well. Have they had any sort of formalized training? Not everybody's been to the Naval Aviation Safety School, right? Not everybody's been to our alma mater, MTSU. But if you've never had any formalized safety training, there are lots of great courses out there. IBAC has great courses for both IS-BAO and IS-BAO standards. The MBAA has an SMS certificate course. USC has a safety manager course. There's tons of stuff that's out there that would be a great starting point, depending on your processes or your resource limitations. But for platform specific training, that's also something that you want to keep in mind as well. So if you are using a formalized platform for your SMS and managing that, make sure that that person is set up for success there, that they've had the same formalized training that the person before them had, or that at least they're getting plugged in to utilize the full extent of that platform itself. And then if you don't have those things, or if you need some additional consulting about, again, not just like 4 pillars of SMS and the components, but even beyond that to industry best practices and things like that, beyond the point and click, there's additional consulting that could come in and hold your hand and help make that make sense for folks. So in an ideal world, we have mentoring from the person who was in this role previously. Hopefully that is the case, that person's, set you up for success that way. But if not, at least do that for the person that comes after you as well. That's something that we really want to focus on in terms of continuity. Again, for our leaders on the call, we're going to talk a little bit about the things that make up a great safety manager or safety officer that you're hiring, but focus on hiring good people. So good people with strong judgment. We work in an industry that very rarely has all of the information at the time that you need to make a decision. It's a very fast-paced environment, and they need to be able to have sound, strong judgment to make those good decisions with very limited information. So hiring good people and then just using the stuff on the right here to train them up in the right way is going to help them go a lot further in the role and make them successful. Now, one thing that will, oh, sorry, Jack, did you have something?
I was just going to say on like kind of like the future proofing concept, a bit of advice I got when I was at Amazon, just from somebody from like a program management standpoint. And I was starting a new program. So it was from the ground up on a lot of things. And I was having issues like, how do I establish different process and procedures? And somebody said, well, start a turnover document and document as if you're going to turn this program over to your best friend. So you want them to have it set up for success and they can just take it off and start running from day one for yourself. Keep that document for yourself, but do it with that in mind. And anyway, so if it's a new safety department or something like that, just a kind of a program management pro tip that I got that I thought was really useful there.
Absolutely. And one of the things along with that documentation that people, again, unless you're at a very structured organization, one of the things that people kind of sleep on is the org structure itself, especially in one of these sort of roles like a safety officer, because it's, over here to the side and it's sort of, it does a little of this, but we also do a little of this and it's a little bit fluid. It tends to become an afterthought in some instances where we just sort of, it's just the expectation that you do this over here. And you're like, does it really matter who you report to? Like, we're all a team. And, but in actuality, this is very, very important to spell this out, because let's say the safety officer here is a technician on the floor in the maintenance department. And in most days in the day-to-day reports to the director of maintenance for maintenance related things. What happens if there's something that happens with the director of maintenance that actually needs to be reported elsewhere up the chain? That safety officer needs that dotted line directly to the accountable executive to be able to say, hey, there's something going on here and I don't want to lose my job. This guy signs my paycheck. I just need to make sure that what's aware or be aware of what's going on in the organization. Which is, again, to refer back to Jack's Navy slide about the definition of, hey, you are responsible for telling me what's going on in the organization, spelling that out very clearly. That is what you're doing here in this org chart, is saying, not only are we going to formalize that in some sort of process documentation, but we're also going to put this in an org chart that says very visually for everyone in the company to see, hey, this person is responsible for telling me what's happening as the accountable executive of the organization and making sure that everything is going the way that it needs to be going, even if it's about me. Like, this person is responsible for telling me what's happening, and that is in their job description. So that is something to keep in mind there. Also, if you're pursuing IS-BAO certification, IS-BAO certification, your auditor is going to ask to see this for this very reason. They want to make sure that everyone is aware this role over here also has no direct reports, unless there's an assistant or someone working that reports up through the safety chain. But if you are doing this as a part-time role, you're a pilot, and 300 days out of the year, you're flying airplanes, but in your part-time, spare time stuff, you're doing safety, you have to have a direct line into leadership to let them know what's going on. And this is very important to define for you, for your organization, and just to ensure that everyone's clear about what's going on. So again, we're talking a little bit about leaders here. There's a video that will, Catherine, if you don't mind dropping the link to this video in the chat, that would be great. I'm not going to play the video on this call, but we're going to speak to it a little bit, and then we're running a little short on our time here, so we'll let you watch this in your spare time. But just to give you the brief synopsis here, this is Simon Sinek. He talks about, he does a lot of leadership, TED Talks and things like that. But in this particular conversation, he's talking about trust versus performance, and how, as a leader, we look for things and skills and traits of people that make people rise to the top in organizations. So in the bottom left over here, we have LP and LT. That stands for low performance. So on the scale of performance and trust, they are both low performance and low trust. So double bad. if you have a low performer who you also can't trust, they don't belong in your organization. Okay, so that's an easy one to define. A little more tricky to define, and a bit of a unicorn, if you will, is you have a very high performer who's high trust. And again, very few and far between, but sometimes they do exist. And over on the left-hand side, we have high performers, low trust. Now, these two folks here at the top, high performers of both the low trust and the high trust, they, based on most metrics that we have in our system, and you see it in the caption there below, based on most of the business metrics that we have, like KPIs or sales performance numbers, or the things we compete on with Folkwood data, or just all the indicators we have for good business are geared toward high performance, but they're not always geared toward trust. And what we found in terms of cultural traits in an organization is it's actually better to have someone who's like a middle or mid-level performer who still has high trust, instead of having a high performing low trust person, right? So and he defines kind of the trust. He's talking about the military. So he's talking about to the military folks. He says, how do you define trust? Like, what do you say? And he says, well, to define trust, I say, well, would I trust him with my life? And would I trust him with my wife? And would I trust him with my money? And if all those things are true, then they fall in the high trust section. So quick ops check there to figure out those high trust people. The trust in your organization really builds good, again, culture and conversations. And that's one of the top 3 traits that we have listed here for defining this, what the skills and the skill sets that you want for an effective safety officer. So trust is number 1. Why does trust matter? You have to be able to foster trust with all levels, all departments, all key stakeholders in your organization. And you have to be able to build trust in order for people to communicate with you, to be able to tell you when something goes wrong. Hey, I messed something up, and I feel like I can trust you and tell you that. Also, you have to build trust with the people above you. So Jack mentioned earlier, we spell it out to say, hey, we have to be able to speak truth to leadership. But that's a really hard thing to do. And if you've never done that before, if you've never given critical feedback to someone who is your superior, and sometimes like very much your superior, sometimes your superior, that's a really tricky thing to do that we don't practice very often. So building trust and having someone who is very high in the trust category is critical to that, because if the person at the top trusts them to give good feedback that's unbiased and that's helpful and that's aligned with the mission, that's a great quality of an effective safety officer that will go a long way. The second part that goes part and parcel to that is effective communication skills, right? So trust is a part of that. There's also some what we call EQ, like emotional intelligence, that goes through effective communication. But effective communication is at all levels. So you need to be able to communicate effectively with your peers and disseminate safety information. You also need to have the discretion to be able to know what you can and can't talk about, because sometimes there's some safety information that you can't discuss. Sometimes safety information escalates and it involves HR and legal and all sorts of components of the department, and you have to know when that's appropriate to communicate, when it's not, and then how to do that. And then again, communicating to your peers, up, down, sideways, all the ways, but also communicating up, which sometimes can be very different than communicating to your peers. So when I go in and I talk to my boss or my boss's boss, the accountable executive, they very likely communicate differently than I do to my peer group, right? So I need to have my effective communication skills down. So I know we start with bottom line up front. We do 3 key points. And if you need anything further, let me know. Okay, so this is one of these things that I don't think gets discussed very often in the safety world, is when you transition into a safety officer role, how do we effectively communicate? Jack, did you have anything to add on that?
I was just going to give a quick example of how, and replicating this in the civilian world may be a little bit difficult, but if you got to get creative with it. The way they tackled this at Naval Safety School, I think, was great. They would overlap. There's also a week-long leadership safety course. So officers who are going to take command would go to safety school and get basically briefed up on leadership's role in safety, or refreshed on it, I guess. And as a part of that, we would take a day and we would just have a practice. They would give some scenarios in practice, giving hard feedback to folks who are quite a bit above you in rank. They might not be your actual superior in the organization, different squadron, whatever, but at least, sometimes they're admirals, they're ex-captains and things like that, and you're an 03 lieutenant, practicing giving feedback to these folks. So, even if it's kind of just some role play and things like that. And then also, if you are the accountable executive, if you set this up, putting this into practice, kind of going back a little bit on some of the slides, but just put into practice not the suggestion, but the requirement of receiving that feedback. And if you're not getting it, ask for it. Hey, what are you seeing? I haven't heard anything in a little while. So, yeah. Sorry.
I'm gonna let you take this next one.
Yeah, and then be the other thing is to be genuinely curious, right? So we also talked about walking around the organization, being involved in the operation, and Kelly mentioned being curious about how the other pieces of the organization fit with something that So if you're a pilot, wanting to understand genuinely more how scheduling fits into that, and how maintenance fits into the overall operation, to work towards mission success. And so, you can find those, again, goes back to hazard analysis and hazard identification. So you can ask some of those kind of dumb pilot questions to a scheduler. Well, why do we do it that way? Maybe there's not a very good reason. And you can find more efficient and safer ways to do something there.
No, that's a great call out. I also want to note that this org structure oh no, it supports continuity. Can you speak to this just for a second, Jack?
Yeah, I think so. So from a continuity standpoint, if there's turnover, in leadership there too, then that also kind of allows you to have somebody there that's consistent. And we say, like, you kind of know where the skeletons are hidden, and you kind of know some of the background of why certain things are the way that they are. We talk a lot about the idea of safety privilege information too. So maybe things that are kind of, they stay within the safety realm. Policies may be derived from that, and then you at least have someone there who understands the why. Maybe if that information doesn't even need to be made public, but you've got somebody there for continuity to understand the why behind why certain things are the way they are.
Exactly. And then that also helps with your safety knowledge management. So if we're relying on continually making progress up that safety mountain, again, taking a look at bandwidth of this person and making sure that with the other things that they've been assigned in the organization, they have the capability of doing that. And if not, let's leverage some resources to help make them more successful. So let's either get them someone to help them, or let's at least lay the groundwork for some succession planning, some process documentation. And we'll note that sign of a great culture is making sure that everyone is aware that we're going to make sure we all leave our roles better than when we found them, right? So let's take the time to document that and make sure that we don't have like a single source of failure on our hands. If that person suddenly leaves the organization, we don't want to have that dip below the line there of a high performing department. Thanks for stepping in there for me, Jack. Sorry, allergy season in Tennessee over here with all the pollen. So one of the other ways that you can, again, have the system help you with this is to leverage technology. So if you've got people that are new to your organization and you're firming up your processes, really lean on your technology to help you make these things simple, meaningful, and seamless. We can talk about updating policies and procedures, but let's not stop at just updating the manual. If we can lean on our technology to codify some of that safety knowledge and support our system, our system section of that, then that's really what we want to do, is just codify that knowledge base to help us over time. So anytime you can codify those processes and procedures that we're writing into manuals or that we're documenting about our position and our role, and put those into a system that helps you do that better over time, you're going to be in a really good spot. That not only are you going beyond and checking the box for compliance, but you're really getting to that level of acceptable risk and doing that in a very dynamic way. So again, if you sat in our presentations before, you've seen this graphic. So I'm not going to step through all of it, but just to say, the way that we get information into the system and the way that our safety managers are processing this information and baking out the full safety story of all those things that are happening within their role, and taking that to the full extent of what they can define, the way that they're implementing those risk controls, and then right here, codifying those lessons learned, not just in a manual and not just in something that someone's, hopefully going to read before they go fly or before they work on an airplane. That's really going to be the differentiator, right? So we want to have that put in the leverage that technology to bring that to the folks that are flying for us, working on our aircraft, moving aircraft, so that they've got a good way to go do that, and they're in the best position they can be to succeed. And then even more important than that is we want to debrief from whatever we did that day and make sure that whatever we learned, whatever went not as expected or not as planned, that we're documenting that back into the system. And so doing that over and over again and using this really, again, amplifies that safety knowledge management and codifies that safety knowledge from one person to the next. And if I go fly today, I'm going to let Jack know that, hey, I did XYZ. It really caught me off guard doing this. Just wanted to give you a heads up. And little stuff like that builds and builds and builds over time to make your system smarter, so that your system can help support you whenever you have those other areas that may be need a little bit of a boost, right? So the ultimate goal is that you have the right information to the right people at the right time to make those better decisions and not step in that same hole twice. So it's all about being your best, not just the compliance part at the very bottom of that mountain. So we're going to do that through supporting change readiness. We're going to, if you've done everything up until this point, like documenting your processes, making sure you've got well-trained people, your technology is up to speed and it's leveraging that, and then you're modifying those other areas to fill the gaps whenever you have situations when you are short-staffed, or you're updating those manuals, or you're changing your technology, your scheduling system, or what have you. That's really going to support making you more resilient. So if you could start with your role, even just a small impact, as something as small as creating a job description for yourself, or doing a job description audit to make sure that the stuff that you're actually doing is captured in that description, we're going to be in a really good position to make some support for change readiness along the way. Again, just kind of bringing it back to where we started here, where the goal is to continue to go up and to the right. And anytime that we learn ideas and we have lessons learned, or we iterate on that job description, or we build that new process, or we learn from what we did, on the flight today or in the hangar today, the goal is to continue to move up and to the right and make sure that we're not losing any of that information along the way, so that we can continue to be more resilient as we continue to go over and to the right. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us today and talking a little bit more about building resilience, starting with your role definition for safety officers and safety managers. I appreciate everybody hopping into the conversation. Jack, thanks for your support on that too, and bringing us some good stuff from the Navy. Yeah. And Catherine, I'll throw it over to you. Do we have any questions from the group?
Yes, there are a couple, and I have two that are very related. One of them is, does the title of the role matter? And related to that is when you say safety officer, are you only talking about for the flight department or the whole company? So how does that work in different arenas for this particular position?
Sure. So yeah, those are very related. what is, I feel like it's a Shakespeare thing, isn't it? Like, what's in a name? I feel like there's something there. We could do some Shakespeare. The name is very important. And I feel like we could probably do an entire safety net on the name itself and the naming convention. I'm not in HR and I don't pretend to be on HR on TV, but the name itself should be indicative of what you are responsible for. So some people don't like the connotation of the name safety officer. Like it will be like, okay, well, we're working on culture and we don't want it to be like a police officer. So maybe we call it safety manager. But this person really doesn't manage other people, nor do they manage, the safety of the entire company. That's really everybody's role. So maybe we call them SMS manager or Jack, what was the name of your role in the Navy?
It was aviation safety officer. A lot of that was connotation of just because it is a role of a officer, commissioned officer, and what you're in charge of too. My hesitation with like the SMS manager type of thing would be because that to me implies that you're really like a admin program manager, just managing kind of like the data of the system. And what we've been talking about is making sure that you're really kind of out on the front lines, being involved in the culture and the safety promotion side of things too. So if you were going to go with like a safety officer title or something like that, I think it's just very important to have that person out and very obviously communicating that they're not a safety cop, like you're kind of walking the walk and showing that you're an advocate, not a officer.
And there's a lot of overlap between the roles and titles of roles that we have in our industry and where they derived from in the military usually. And there's a lot of overlap there. So that's fair that it comes over probably from safety officer from the military scope. For those that started on a civilian route, there may just be a knowledge gap or an educational gap you need to fill with that. Other things that I've seen would be director of safety. I've seen VP of safety. Those are usually defined at a higher level, like from a downtown office. If you're working in a flight department, like your approval limits and things like that put you at the right level for the organization. And then the second part of that question would be, is it for just the flight department or is it for the whole company? Again, that's really more of a question for your HR department and figuring out what does the role itself look like? What is the definition of the role and my responsibilities? Is it just for the flight department and making sure what we're doing here in the flight department is solid from a safety perspective? Is it a company that has a flight department and an FBO and a 145 repair station, and I'm responsible for safety for all of that? So maybe you have safety officers at each of those spots, and then it rolls up to a different level of safety, like a director of safety, for example. So a lot of that's going to have to go through your HR team to determine what that title needs to be. But I would say, if you can work with your HR professional, if you're already in the role and you're sort of editing this as you go, make sure that you are taking into account the culture of your organization and the perception of your role from your peers as well, and make sure that you're speaking to that and making that a part of the discussion.
Great. Boy, I love the advocacy officer, that distinction of the roles and how what that function is. It's pretty multifaceted. What would you say is the most critical quality for the safety manager role?
In my perspective, it's trust. I would say trust is number one, because if you don't have that, you really don't have anything else. Some ancillary, I won't say ancillary, they're also very important. Things like emotional intelligence, to be able to have, good communication skills, up, down, sideways, being genuinely curious and asking good questions. You don't have to be all knowing. I think Jack even mentioned this, like it's good to have some technical knowledge. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know when to raise your hand and ask a question or a curious question. But above all of that, if you don't have trust with your peers, with your supervisors, with the people that work for you, below you, anywhere in the organization, then you don't have the opportunity to use those other skills. Jack, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would just add approachability too. Especially if you are like a VP of safety or safety director, something like that. Don't be like above anyone, because like Kelly said, that might just be so you can authorize certain things in an organization. So approachability is very important too.
You mentioned trust at the very beginning, and that is the last question. Any tips for building trust with your teams?
Ooh,
nice lead
good
in
one.
there. Yep.
Yeah. Jack, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, I would say that to me, that starts with like walking the walk, so if showing your own mistakes, so submitting your own reports or calling yourself out publicly, even if it's small things, if you're like me, I'm basically a perfect pilot, find small mistakes, like, hey, I fat fingered a radio frequency the other day and had to, be told, whatever it is, find something that you can call yourself out on and walk the walk there, so people see that, again, especially if this is kind of a newer concept to your organization, like, people might be skeptical to have that just culture, that reporting culture, and things like that. So walking the walk, I think, is the best way to start building that trust.
That's a great one. I think too, you mentioned it, even if you're new, but I would say sometimes when this position turns over, or when you have like a long history with a company, you may have ebbs and flows of trust within your organization that happen as well, depending on who fills the role or kind of what's happening in the company during that time. So I feel like there's a quote there somewhere, and I'm going to misattribute this probably, but just knowing that trust is earned drop by drop, and then it's lost in buckets. It's something along those lines. So it may take a while to do some of those repeated actions, like self-disclosing and building that trust drop by drop with people, and showing that this is a safe space, and really how you handle those first reports that come in as you are managing safety, so that they know, like, hey, if I submit something, if I submit a safety report to Jack, he's not going to terminate me because I said something wrong, or because I did something that whatever the case may be, that I can trust him with that information to help us improve and get better. And it's not a witch hunt to try to find people to fire, So it really takes a lot to build that trust bit by bit. And it is a fine line to walk between making sure there's some accountability there, and we've got good just culture, but we're also building that trust with our people, so that this is a safe space to come, and we're all going to continuously improve and learn and get better, as long as our intentions are pointed in the right direction.
Fantastic. What a great topic. So much to dig into here, but you've really provided such great information. Thank you, Kelly and Jack, as always, for joining us here today on the IS-BAO SafetyNet webinar series. I know we'll be offering these in Portuguese and Spanish here shortly, and we'll have another series of webinars coming up. I've put the link in. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today, and there's the link to the future webinars, as well as the recorded versions of these. These are all available on our website. Kelly and Jack, thank you, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Okay, bye.